Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stoked.live podcast, where we empower you to be your best at work and in life. I'm Dr. Jacob Engelskirger, co founder of Stoked and the current acting CEO. I'm a consulting psychologist, and I am thrilled to be with you here as host of today's podcast, stepping in for Brian Varkvisser. I have a very special guest for you today. He happens to be a good friend of mine, and he's also a renowned expert in his field, a field that we're all acquainted with here in California, unfortunately, or fortunately rather. He's one of the most hardworking people I know. He is a committed firefighter. He is a captain in the San Jose Fire Department. He's also president of San Jose Firefighters Local 230 Union. I'm stoked to introduce you to my friend, Captain Jerry May. Welcome, Captain May. It's great to have you today.
Thanks, Jake. It's always funny to be called captain. Um, Still don't feel like it's kind of like someone calling you dad, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm a dad." So, no, thanks for having me, man. I'm really happy to be here and happy to let people into the world and just kind of like have a normal conversation like we do all the time. So it'll be awesome.
Right on, right on. Um, and maybe for the purposes of the pod today, we'll drop our more formal titles and go on a first name basis if that works for you.
Absolutely, man. That's great.
Right on. Right on. Well, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear a bit more, Jerry, about what you do as a captain in the San Jose Fire Department and as the local 230 union president, if you
Yeah.
care to share a bit about those
Ab-
roles.
Absolutely. So I've been a firefighter for 20 years now. I actually started with the state as a wildland firefighter. It was CDF at the time. They're now Cal Fire. So I was a wildland firefighter, and they've kind of transitioned to like all risk fire department. I did that for about 4 seasons, and that job like is nuts because you're going up and down the state during fire season. And really, there's not fire season anymore, but it's like 9 months out of the year where California, you're going to massive, which they call campaign fires, um, all year round. And unfortunately, like we see that more and more now. Like the devastating fires in Los Angeles started back in January, which is insane to think about, right? Where we usually think fire season starts in summer, but had the opportunity to do that for 4 seasons really helped me understand like if this was the career that I wanted, and wanted what I actually want to do and get out of it. Um, I got to work with a lot of like old school, kind of the end of the Vietnam era, um, like captains and leadership. And so their style was totally different, like completely different generation, the way that they interact with us, the way that they treated us. So I was really fortunate to kind of get to see like that type of leadership style. And then in 2011, I got hired in San Jose on a Safer grant, which technically was a grant that was active for like 2 years. And they said, hey, because of like the recession, you're going to be here for 2 years. We don't know what's going to happen, but you have a chance at working here. And that's to me, it was kind of like making like the major league jump, like going from seasonal where you're not obviously a full-time employee, but going to San Jose was so rad because it was literally that feeling of like, wow, dude, I finally made it. Like I've been working so hard. That was something I was so passionate about, like achieved my goal, and I've been there for 15 years now. So as a fire captain, I think people like it's pretty in my opinion, it's pretty basic. Like in San Jose, what we do is we have a station. At our station, I'm in charge of the entire station and the people who work there. So right now I work at Station 5. I have three other people who work for me. We all work together. Obviously, we're on an engine, which is Engine 5. We have a fire engineer, and then a firefighter and a firefighter paramedic. So we get the opportunity to do everything from, like I was talking about earlier, wildland calls to emergency medical calls, hazmats, and of course, like any type of fire. So it's a very busy, diverse city, both culturally diverse and also the call volume and the type of calls that we go to. So there's never like a normal day at the office. It's pretty crazy. So you can imagine over 30 years, it's it's like a knockout drag out fight over 30 years. You're just dealing with a lot of trauma, just the type of calls that we go to. We see a lot of death, unfortunately. Um, a lot of highs and lows. Obviously, we deal with because of the work, PTSD, sleep deprivation because we work a 48-hour shift, so you're not getting like quality sleep at all. People deal with substance abuse issues um, and so with all of that, that was kind of like why I became more engaged and wanted to make a difference for our members, because I saw what they're going through, especially when they got hurt. That's when we see a lot more people kind of like go down a path of like substance abuse issues or feeling detached from the job because it's really like it's your family. You're in the firehouse for a third of your life, which is nuts to think about, right? Like I'm away from
Yeah.
my own kids and my wife, right? And so we end up in this position where, you get hurt or something happens and you're not there. And now you're detached from your work family. And so that's when I kind of got involved in the union. And we can jump into that more, but you can give me a second to breathe here. But I just want to see
Yeah.
like if there's any kind of like other questions you had kind of about like what we do specifically as fire captains or just jump into the union stuff whenever you think's a good time.
Yeah, it's just it never fails to amaze me how many different types of physical, psychological, and emotional challenges you and other firefighters navigate, uh, leadership totally aside from your role as a leader, as a captain. And like I would imagine that adding that leadership position into the mix must, if we stick with your role as an active firefighter, outside of the union, I would imagine that your leadership duties must make it even more challenging in ways to navigate the personal demands of the job when there's a need to put others first at times.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, honestly. Sometimes it feels like you're a mentor, you're sometimes like a parent, sometimes you're like
Yeah,
and then sometimes you have to be like the person who's like giving discipline, but this is all like in this really weird dynamic of like this is still a job, this isn't like like your buddy's house or something. It's like no, you're still getting paid to be a professional, but you're also potentially putting your life on the line for not just for each other but for like random citizens. So it's this really dynamic like group of people that you're working with all the time, and you're trying to do your best for the citizens that you're sworn to protect, and then also like for each other because we obviously have to work as a team to rely on each other and like our lives depend on it. So yeah, it's really interesting. I think from like a leadership standpoint, like I said, I feel like in this profession, a lot of it doesn't necessarily mean all like the classes you have or the amount of time that you're technically training. A lot of it is just like on the job experience. And I think the longer that you're sitting in the back seat where the firefighters are,
yeah,
or driving as an engineer, like the more like sets and reps you have at being ready to be a captain. And so I kind of prided myself on, I think I waited about 15 years to promote to captain. So I think that gave me the level of comfortability to be like, hey, I can be successful at this. I've seen the job, I understand the job. I've had really good mentors to show me, how to be successful at that. And then I also saw like really shitty guys who are doing the job where I'm like, dude, I do not, there's zero part of what that guy brings to the table that I want. So I think that's like just like anything else in life, right? You're like, like your friends, parents or whatever, and you're like, man, when I'm a parent, that's like the parent that I want to be. And you can try it and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but yeah, I feel like pretty stoked to kind of have the the position that I have now as a fire captain and feel like very confident in that position now. So, but it takes a long time.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. It strikes me that a lot of the leaders we talk to and interview here on the podcast cite examples of how powerful mentors have been in their life and role models, both sometimes both within and outside of their career. And it sounds like mentorship and having firefighters serve as role models to you has been a huge part of what's kept you focused and able to progress in your career the way that you've wanted to. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, man. I think it's just like, I think you see in any industry, like successful people have people that they are not only able to like look up to, but like constantly learn from. And kind of it helps ground them, go back to like, okay, if that's a person that I admire to be like, not necessarily to be, but be like, and take those good qualities, like it always gives you a chance to like throw on the brake, be like, hey, what's like a reset, like reestablish where, where my principles are. And I think that's been really key for me in like this journey in the fire service and in the union world. It's just like it's things can get really hectic, but if you just take that deep breath and kind of be like, okay, hey, like even on a critical emergency, like slow down, think for a second, like what are my priorities? Like what do I know keeps me composed? And like I go back to that all the time, especially when things are like super chaotic, when you pull up on a fire, and a house fire, and there's reports of someone trapped inside, like your adrenaline's going like a million miles an hour. And it's like your call. They're like, hey, you are the captain, you are the incident commander at the time, you're first on scene, and you have to tell your guys to go inside and go rescue that person. You're going in with them. So there's a
Whoa.
lot of responsibility there. Yeah. Yeah.
That is quite a heavy example of the type
Yeah.
of work that you do. Wow. Wow. It also
Yeah.
strikes me, Jerry, that uh given the life or death nature of the work, the family bonds that firefighters who work in a station together have are pr- sound like they're so deep and so powerful, and probably so protective against like the demands and stresses of the job, just in the way that a like healthy, well-functioning family supports and protects its members from the stresses of life. And I know from our previous conversations that it's a really big part of like the culture of firefighters and something that not everyone's super aware of. So I wanted to point that part out too.
Yeah, it is. I think we just at this point, like I could just kind of take it for granted, but I think it's even like you want someone's experience in the fire service, like from the beginning, you want to instill that into them, like what you were given to begin with, right? And it's like it's about having compassion, it's about having empathy, it's about knowing that like we're all gonna make mistakes, but like not breaking each other down, but how do we build each other back up? And that's how you create that level of trust. And a lot of that comes through like training, repetition, experience. And then like as a leader, what I've come to realize obviously over time is like certain people aren't going to be comfortable with certain situations. And so how do you step in to not necessarily like alleviate that experience, but how do you make that something where they're able to not just cope with it, but be successful the further they go. So there's a lot to this career, man. And it's just like there's so many different like levels of things that we just like I said we take for granted. And so like how do you continue to be a good human and then also be able to not just take care of like the people around you, but then like you're there for someone's literally worst day, it could be of their life, when they call 911 and you're like, okay, this it can become like the repetition of it. Sometimes like you have to, like I said earlier, you have to stop and be like, this is about customer service. And yeah, I might have gone on, the same person like for 10 times in a row, and it's so mind numbing, but you're like, this is obviously an emergency to them. So how do we deal with this in a way that's like that level of professionalism? And so, yeah, it can be a challenge sometimes for sure.
For sure. I hadn't even considered the fact that having a repeat caller might pose its own challenges, but clearly that's
Yeah.
something to wrap your head around.
Yeah, and it's just like I today in our society, I think like, and I wanted to bring this up, is we overutilize 911 for everything, right? Like we're just told as kids, like, hey, if you see an emergency, call 911. Like we practice that so early. And then I think we get into like this, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but people see like someone sleeping on the, in the park and they're like, that guy's dead, call 911. Or they see something and maybe they don't like take the time to investigate it or look and see or ask someone seriously, like, hey, are you okay, do you need help? They just look at someone, they're like, hey, call 911. That does not look right. So I think at the end of the day, what happens for us is we're on the receiving end of that, and so our call volume has gone up like it's an insane amount. I want to say like 45% in the last like 15 years. And so, yeah, I
Whoa.
mean, there you reach a certain level of I think fatigue when you're going on the same type of calls where it's like you wish you could call that person back who called in and be like, "Hey, did you just like do the like human like kind human thing and just ask the person if they needed help, or maybe they just need a bottle of water, or maybe they just, like needed to like move out of the way of a storefront or something like that." So I'm not trying to sound like bitter about it, but it definitely has created a huge stress on us. So we've had to learn how to deal with that. And you can imagine that burnout. You're just like, yeah, we're just kind of like the jack of all trades. Call 911, like the fire department will show up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like that's an important that message is important to you to convey to our listeners, that maybe it's not always the best first step to call 911 if it's not a life-threatening emergency, and they might themselves be able to do something to help a
Yeah, for
situation.
sure. And I think it's just like I think as a society, we need to like do a little bit better job of like, okay, 911 is a convenience factor, right? But there's so many other
Yeah.
resources that we have, like especially in California and in the Bay Area, that are available to like help our community. And the problem is a lot of times, and it's the honest truth, when you call 911, like we're the catch-all. We show up, we help people, whatever the situation is. But the problem is that a lot of people fall through the cracks of the system, and then you're dealing with like these chronic issues that are never really being resolved, but as a society we just continue to call 911. And so sometimes it can feel like you're just kind of especially as a firefighter, a small fish in this bigger pond. But I think if like as a society we start to like engage a little bit more and be like, you know what, this person, I've seen this person on the corner, you know for the last 2 weeks, and they look like they're having a psychiatric emergency, right? Like there's nothing that we can do as firefighters for that person except hopefully
Uh-huh.
get them some services, right? But at the end of the day, like at least in like Santa Clara County, that's a behavioral health services issue. And so my point of this whole story is like, how do we get people the help that they need in a way where we can educate people to be like, hey, this is behavioral health, this is psychiatric, this is like something that the behavioral health team can come out, and I think in our county it's called the care team. But like that's where I'd love to see our society go, to get people the right help so that they're not falling through the cracks, and that families get some, not necessarily closure, but have the resources available to them.
For sure. For sure. Wow. Yeah, I think in a lot of I would imagine in a lot of people's minds, firefighters deal with fires, and maybe they're not as aware of the paramedic functions and the other types of calls that are received. And in situations where it sounds like there's certainly need at times, but your resources are so valuable, and 911 and the firefighting resources in any area are a a limited
Totally.
resource and need to be preserved to use in the cases where their use is
Yeah,
warranted.
for sure. And I think just like more of a kind of little background on that, like about in our city, which is a big city, we run 110,000 calls a year. We're also like one of the yeah,
Wow.
we're also one of the lowest staffed fire departments in the nation too, being that we just don't have the resources available to us. But that being said, on every fire engine and fire truck, there's at least one paramedic, and there could be three MTs, there could be two paramedics, two EMTs. But the point is that 70% of what we do is medical emergencies. And so the
Wow.
reason why we show up when people are like, why is a fire engine here? Like those guys just, take up a bunch of parking. Um, the reason why we're here is because there are less ambulances in the system than there are fire engines and fire trucks. And in the 90s, the transition to advanced life support for having paramedics on scene for especially like cardiac arrests, strokes, seizures, it enabled essentially the fire department to step into that role. And that's where we play this critical position in society because we have to stabilize someone when they're having an emergency medical incident. We stabilize them, they're in the field, get them loaded onto the gurney, and then transition to the emergency room. But that it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, could be half an hour. That is critical time for every single person, to survive, especially the severity of their medical emergency. So that's why you see us there. That's what we do. And that's where, like I said, you're doing sometimes, especially for us, and just because we are such a busy system, when you're doing 30 years of that, you're seeing a lot of different things. Like, and there's good outcomes, and there's a lot of bad outcomes, but it's something that is like can be pretty heavy over 30 years.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Wow. Um, yeah, I mean, like if you're comfortable getting into it a bit, like I'm curious how you handle that as a firefighter, or as a person, as a
Yeah,
like how do
totally.
you manage?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, and I'll be 100% honest, like, I didn't know how to manage it earlier in my life, like, especially in my early 20s. Like, dude, it was really hard. Like, you end up in sometimes like these constant cycles of like sleep deprivation and like trying to take care of yourself, trying to like establish or like maintain relationships like, with family and friends, and then like dating and whatever. And I noticed like definitely when I was in my early 20s, like one of the easiest things that it was just easy to do is like go out and start drinking, and that was one of the times where it was like luckily I had the self-awareness to be like, man, this is something that you could see had become, and I think I was just more vigilant to understand it, but you could see the people who had dealt with their stress like that at work, and like, dude, they're kind of a disaster at work, especially like
Yeah.
20 years in. It's just like I would see these guys, I'm like, man, I do not want to end up looking like this guy or, having the lifestyle of this guy. It's just so hard. It's so rough. Um, and so I think when I got a little bit older and a little bit more mature and started to understand, it was like I had to prioritize like my physical fitness. I had to prioritize my mental health. And I think a lot of that had to do with like, taking time for myself, especially now having three kids, right? It's like, sometimes just like going hitting a bucket of balls. Like I suck at golf, but just hitting those balls sometimes are like, man, makes me feel so much better. Or sometimes even just like if the time, I think we're all in this position as parents, like your time is so limited, but dude, just taking that 20-minute walk with the dog, and just kind of getting my mind right really has helped me like just deal with a lot of that built up stress and anxiety over time. And I think it's also helped me recognize um just like the way that I'm like where I'm at in my head. right? Like if I've had a tough like tour of 48 hours at work and I've seen some really like hard things or dealt with some really stressful things, like I have to be able to like get myself in a position to come home to be able to decompress where I'm not dealing with that like in the middle of like playing with my kids or talking to my wife. So I think it's just a lot of that self-awareness. And then once you are aware, for me, it's taking that next step. Okay, hey, before you go home, like take 30 minutes to yourself to go like get coffee and just like walk around the neighborhood, you know? So it's definitely been a progression for sure.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like you figured out a lot of things that really work for you and allow you to like recalibrate yourself and get present with yourself and your loved ones when you're not on shift. And it sounds so important. Even the transition that the way you go about transitioning from a shift to family time seems really important. And having a ritual like getting coffee and walking around the neighborhood and being present with, I would imagine, with yourself at that time, and the fact that you're back in your home neighborhood at that time seems like a really powerful way of doing that. Those kinds of rituals are great ways, I think, of facilitating a transition out of a super stressful life or death type environment.
Yeah, totally. And I think like as the older we get, Jake, like I think you feel this way too. Like growing up, what I used to do was, and even in my early 20s and stuff, and was like I loved being in the water. I loved surfing. Like I didn't care how shitty the waves were. I just want to get in the water, and that helped me so much. And like at the time, I never thought about it, but I really realized that. And then kind of moving away from having that accessibility to surf, I really had to like focus that same energy into doing stuff that gave me that same feeling as being in the water. So just like I'm sure for you sometimes it's like skating, just having an opportunity to just like that time for yourself, that quality time, like just find whatever it is. And like yeah, when I do get back in the water now, it's like such a special time, and I'm like, I just really enjoy that so much and really look forward to it. So it makes it like that much more beneficial for me when I set that time aside to go do it.
That's amazing. Yeah, I totally relate to that. Like there's nothing like being in crispy, cold ocean water and having that flow over your body for meditation and for stoke. And I know that you're super stoked on surfing too. It's an amazing thing. And yeah, like finding proxies for it has been a big thing for me. I know I'm a little bit closer to the ocean than you these days, and it's probably a bit easier for me to get out there every now and then. But yeah, skateboarding's a great proxy, and like other things too that let me find that kind of flow state, rock climbing, recalibrate, be stoked and excited about doing something physical, doing something a little competitive maybe, or not, or just being with myself. It's
Yeah.
really it's a really great thing to have hobbies like that. Super
Yeah,
healthy.
no, it's awesome for sure. I love it, man.
I know we've gotten away a bit from talking about your role as president of Local 230, and I'd love for our listeners and viewers to hear a bit more about that leadership role if you'd like to get into it, Jerry.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the crazy thing, Jake, is like growing up, I felt like going to public school, like I didn't know shit about unions. Like just kind of this one part of like 10th grade, you would hear about like unions and that was it. And even getting into a profession where, when I was 18, I started as a seasonal firefighter, like I was in a union, but it's still like the explanation of it, like net didn't really make sense, you know, a lot of the benefits I didn't get, and it just like there's not that education um where explaining what the union does and why it's there for you. But the biggest thing that I look at for me being a union leader and seeing successful union leaders and all the different levels of like local union versus like what that union does at the state level versus what it does at like the international level. um it really breaks down to three things, and it's kind of my mindset. Like when I go to work, it's my mindset when I'm driving home and I'm thinking about like what the union has done. But it really comes down to like our wages, benefits, and working conditions. And over the history of our job, because it has been so dangerous, a lot of people have died doing this job, and a lot of people still die doing this job. But the reality is what the union does is they step in and they are the ones who say, "Hey, there's a problem over here. Like we need to address this. Why do people continue to die from this? Why do people continue to not have the adequate resources or adequate equipment that's keeping them from, being able to go home to their families at the end of the day?" And so for me, the union has really, over the last 50 years, especially in California, I mean, anything from, cancer presumptions that we get from our job because we're exposed to so many products of combustion and carcinogens, um, to, our benefits for our spouses when we pass away. I mean, everything for me, the union has given me, and that's been like a pillar of leaders who have given us this opportunity to have what we have today. It's not like you go in as a firefighter and you ask for an individual raise like based on performance. It doesn't work that way. Your union goes to bat for you. They negotiate your contract. They make sure that everyone's treated fairly. That the city has to follow our contract. That you're protected if you're essentially go through progressive discipline if something happens. So the union does do a lot for you. I think as the president of the union, you also are kind of in this weird like political realm where you deal with, for me, for example, I deal with city council members, I deal with city administration, a fire chief, I deal with our state assembly members, state senators, and then all the way up to our elected officials in Washington D.C. So you're dealing with like the fundamental purpose of the union, and then to me there's this whole political realm because, and this is what union really comes down to me, is that the elected officials, especially if you help them get elected, they're going to continue to support you in your work in your industry. Now a lot of people say, well, you guys sound like a special interest. Well, the special interest is public safety. Like
Yeah.
our job is to protect you. Like you can't, you're not going to be able to like give yourself CPR when you're having a heart attack, right? You're probably not going to be able to put out the fire inside your house if, a quarter of it's fully involved. So like what we do is we go to bat when it comes to politics, and we say, "Hey, we want people who are going to support us. We want people in elected office who are going to continue to, make sure that we have competitive wages, competitive benefits, that we have our pensions are protected." Those are all things that like firefighters have fought for over 100 years. So those are important, and I think at the end of the day, like I'll tell you what, it's very rare to go to a community where they talk about the fire department and they think it's like a wasted resource. Like there's always some value there. And so I feel very grateful for that, for the people who have got us to that position today, who have shown like why we're valuable, why we're an asset, why we're a critical part of the community. So yeah, it's definitely a cool job to have. It's definitely a second full-time job, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of people and their families benefit from having strong union. Um, every community is stronger with stronger unions in it. People who are not in unions, they end up getting wage increases, and their benefits improve because they're essentially competing with union jobs. So I always go back to that. Like our communities are stronger with strong unions, and yeah, I'm proud to be a union member.
That's awesome. Your pride really shows, and your pride in your role as current acting president and ability to advocate for other union members really shows. It's I admire your authenticity, Jerry, and your ability to be so connected to your passion and your work and yourself in the way that you are.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think sometimes it's like definitely can feel draining, because you give so much to to feel like not just protect everyone else, but to make sure that they're taken care of, and that they're treated like an um that, and even to my last breath, like I'll keep fighting for that, and it's something that I'm really proud of. But it definitely, like we go back to, it can be a lot. It can be a lot on the family. It can be a lot on my mental health. It's like sometimes you're just sitting there and you're like, man, just shut your brain off for a minute and stop thinking about, these issues that aren't going to be resolved like right, tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, have there been any like unexpected leadership lessons that have arisen for you in your time as president of Local 230 that you're comfortable sharing with our audience today?
Yeah, totally. And I think this kind of goes back to anyone who's stepping into a leadership role or like uneasy about, that next chapter, what that looks like for them. But I think like anyone who enters a position in leadership is going to have that feeling of like imposter syndrome. Like,
Mm,
should I be
yeah,
here? Right? Like, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Like, am I gonna figure this out? And I think that like self-doubt is always like it's just natural because it's something that's new, it's challenging, it's hard, it's something that like you're you're not just like one day signing up like I'm gonna be the union president. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And so I think like getting over that hump and like having some I think some benchmarks to hit, like there's a couple things that I like to do, especially like after the beginning of the first fiscal year, like give myself 30 days to come up with, okay, where are things at? What direction are we going? And what are going to be my goals for the next 90 days? And then it's another benchmark in 90 days. Hey, where am I at reevaluating these things? And you just continue to like build off of that, okay, 6 months from now, a year from now, and you're not always going to hit a lot of those, and a lot of those things, like especially because we work in government, and we're a large agency, and we have to deal with a lot of different factors. Like you're not going to meet those timelines, but it
yeah,
teaches you patience. It teaches you, collaboration, and sometimes it's like, hey, listen, I've tried to, change this issue for enough time here, and I've had it in my timeline and it's not adding up. Well, okay, now it's time to go fight. And so I've been doing a lot of that lately, unfortunately, where it's challenging in the union role because being confrontational, not just for fun or sport, but because there's an issue that's not being resolved by potentially fire administration or the city manager's office. Then you have to kind of kick things into a different gear, and that's where I think for me, like that took probably the longest to get comfortable doing, because being confrontational and taking a position and sticking to it, especially because you're representing 650 people, 650 firefighters and their families. Like
yeah.
no one
Wow.
wakes up and is like, "Oh, this is a great feeling." It's hard and it's draining, and you also have the feeling of like, "Man, I hope I'm making the right decision here because it's impacting a lot of people."
It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight on your shoulders. Man, I'm
Yeah.
I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed and in
Uh,
awe of the work that you do.
thanks, man. Yeah, it's uh it's good. I will tell you what, my wife Nicole is gonna be stoked one day when I'm not in this game, I think she'll be stoked, and then she's like, just go be a fire captain, like have that. But Yeah, I still love waking up every day and like having this desire to like make things better for our members. So it's a cool feeling.
In my mind, it means you're the right guy for the job. It's they're lucky to have you. It's amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Sometimes I think the other hard part too that I've learned, Jake, is like no matter what, like you're gonna have haters. You're gonna have people who doubt you, especially in large organizations. There's always gonna be people who are like sharpshooting you. Um, and you know what? That's part of like growing as a leader. That's part of like taking some constructive feedback and criticism. Like, I walk into a room sometimes, into a fire station, and like when you go into a fire station, and you sit at the kitchen table, it's like people are like inviting you in to their grandma's house for the first time, and you're sitting down with like sometimes 10 people just staring at you, and they're like, "Okay, like welcome to grandma's house," like you
Wow.
better show us some respect here, and you're like, sometimes you just have to learn to like take the level down a little bit. Maybe they're concerned about some issues that are outside of my control. But it's just like sometimes it's doing some code switching, sometimes it's just connecting with them on some like basic levels to build up to the harder things. But it's not always like walking into like a room where a bunch of people are stoked to see you. It can be confrontational. And so I think learning how to deal with some of those doubters and haters, it's like I learned this really smart lesson from like one of my mentors in the IFF. He was number two in the IFF. His name's Frank Lima, and he said, "I walk into a room, and if I know there's people who have issues with what I stand for or what I'm doing, I say, I want you to be a front stabber and take the opportunity to take a shot at me while I'm in the room. Like
Love it.
I'm giving you that opportunity. Like bring up that issue that is making your blood boil for whatever, or someone's talking shit at the dinner table or whatever. It's like I'm there in the room. I'm here. I'm giving you my time. I'm spending my time to address your issue. And so that's something that I always tell people, hey, I'm here. Like there's only one of me. If there's 100 fire stations between the three shifts, I'm not going to have the opportunity to come back here when your next issue comes up. So here's my phone number. Here's a way to contact me. But I want to address whatever issues you have and take the shot now. Like because I'm here and you can hear it from my mouth. And I felt like that's been really successful and really powerful because I think people realize like, hey, this guy's just one person. He's doing his best. Maybe there's some issue that they didn't have all the information where they could be jumping to conclusions. But I think that's something that I've learned as a leader, that you have to address that uncomfortable feeling in the room, um, because firefighters, it's like there's two things firefighters hate. They hate change and they hate the way things are currently. So you gotta figure something out, to appease them
Wow.
for whatever reason. Yeah,
Wow. And you're teaching them and you're encouraging them when you come in with the stab me in the front uh, approach to engage in constructive dialogue, and even if it's conflict with you, and
yeah,
gives creates an opportunity to hash things out. I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
it does, and I think it's just more like of our nature too, because we don't have a lot of time to like deal with the bullshit. It's like get to the point, get to, what we need to address because that's a lot of our job. It's like what is the bottom line issue here? How do we make things better? How do we put out the fire? How do we, you know, uh get this person out of cardiac arrest? Like we
Yeah.
just get to the point and I think in that environment it works. Now, do I come home and, telling my wife, "Hey, what? Tell me, like, get to stop in the front." No, so you have to do. I like I said, you have to like learn how to code switch, and not every fire station was like that. Like, there's some fire stations who are like, they're stoked. The first thing they do is they say, hey, thank you for the union for everything you've done. So it's just like reading the room, reading that environment, and like just learning to grow as a person and as a leader in those experiences.
Well, I think your leadership skills, your emotional intelligence, your people skills, your firefighting skills have all come through in our conversation today in droves. And it's just been such a joy to have you join me for the pod and share some of your experience as both a firefighter, fire captain, and union president. It's really awesome. I'm inspired, Jerry, and I'm stoked to continue to follow your career as it progresses. I'm realizing that we're coming up on the end of our time for the pod today, and wondering if you'd like to leave people with any final remarks, maybe even about how to contact you if they're interested in reaching out in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to thank you first and foremost having me on, man. It's been awesome. Like I always like being able to go back and forth, and I love this format. Like I think it's so cool, and I hope people got some information out of this today where they're like, oh, okay, like I know a little bit more about the fire department. I know a little bit more about unions. Um, I think that's always helpful because not everyone has an opportunity to talk to like a fire captain or listen to a fire captain. So I appreciate that opportunity. Yeah, if you'd like to learn more or uh, just kind of see what we do or check us out. We have a pretty cool Instagram page, I think, where it kind of shows what we do as a labor union and also what it's like being a firefighter, what type of emergencies we go to. If you follow us on Instagram or Facebook, San Jose Firefighters, I think it's really cool. We do some pretty amazing work. So it's not necessarily about me, but highlighting the work of firefighters. I think is really important for people to understand the value and why you have a fire department and why what your taxes go to. And so I think it's a really valuable resource. And yeah, if anyone ever has any questions, you can always hit me up on there. I run the page, me and another individual. So yeah, I can always answer questions. So yeah, man, appreciate you having me, Jake. It's been rad.
Right on. Thank you so much, Jerry. Take good care, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much. Dude. We'll be in touch and yeah, go enjoy that beautiful family, dude.
And you as well. Take care.
Thanks, man. All right,
Thanks.
later.
See ya.